Um, the title, as you may have noticed, is Selenophile. And yes, I identify as a Selenophile, which means that, well, selenophilia is loving the moon and finding it soothingly captivating. So if you identify with that, then you are a selenophile. In other words, you consider me a lunatic or moonstruck. But basically, selenology is the branch of astronomy that deals with the nature and origin of the physical features of the moon. And no, I don't have a telescope that I look at the moon every night, but um, it's it's that constant companion. And you might be asking, how does this fit into New Thought? Well, if I had to pick a candle, I would pick the second candle, the Earth-based traditions. Um, but culturally and historically, the moon has had spiritual connections for many, many different spiritual pathways. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history. We'll talk a little bit about the myths and the science behind the moon, and then the spiritual meanings of the phases, because the moon is all about flow and cycling. And as part of the natural world, no, we can't see it every night. Sometimes it's cloudy, you can't always see it, but we know it's there. And when we do see it, you could be out walking the dog or just taking a walk yourself or camping or whatever. And it's just right there. You can always, you just notice it and feel that sense of a little bit of sense of wonder um, at this magical light that's up there in the sky. So it really has a deep connection to nature and the universe. And I think looking at the moon reminds us that we're part of something bigger. It's been seen as a source of creativity and imagination. There's poems and songs, and it's been a source of worship or since millennia for millennia. And that cycle of the moon really demonstrates stability and a constant in an ever-changing world. So it really can be a source of inspiration. I came across a quote from Socrates that wisdom begins in wonder. And if we use that sense of wonder that can be inspired by the moon, we can use that as a path to wisdom. So when did moon watching really start? Well, our ancient ancestors as they developed agriculture before it got really, really organized, but as they were developing agriculture, they kind of had to pay attention to the seasonal changes. Um, they needed to know, is it going to be rainy? Is it going to be dry? When are we going to have light? When are we not going to have light? They noticed that certain plants would bloom or fruit at different times of the moon. So they started to track it. And when you think about it, our modern calendar is based on the moon cycles. It's 28.5 days for a moon cycle. And we use a 30-day calendar. So our seasonal changes are based on the revolution of the Earth around the sun, but our monthly day-to-day changes are based on the phases of the moon. So archaeology tells us that about 25,000 years ago, people started to really pay attention to the moon. And there was a little bit of variation between different cultures and when they specifically did this, but it's been used. It was some writers, medieval writers, talked about when they tracked the history of, say, the kings of England, especially Arthur. It was believed that Merlin would use the moon for prophecy. It was a religious symbol for both Christians and Muslims. And it was actually even used, some scientists in the Middle Ages decided when the Black Death came around that, oh, well, based on some astrology changes, what planet was where, blah, 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 and the phase of the moon was really the cause of the Black Death. So people the bottom line is it has been used for that purpose for a long time. Medieval Sufis actually believed that the moon was a representation or represented divine love, not just basic love, but divine love. So let's dig a little deeper into these cycles. Um, Actually, wait a minute. I wanted to talk about a little bit of evidence. So, what do we really know about the effects of the moon? Well, there are certain species of sea life, like crustaceans and little plankton type life forms in the ocean that are their life cycles are tied to the moon. And there's been lots of speculation that, oh, well, the moon has effects on people's behavior and even some physical function. There's a lot of old nurses' tales that, people are going to have cardiac problems at different phases of the moon. But the only physical change that has been demonstrated or proven with research is that the full moon can interrupt sleep. And they did this interesting study where they sort of like controlled for the length of light and whether people knew what the phase of the moon was. And they found that there was greater sleep latency, meaning people didn't fall asleep as fast. Their REM sleep was not as deep. They woke up 20 minutes earlier. So there are some changes with sleep, but nothing else beyond that physically has ever been demonstrated. So all that stuff about moon controlling behavior and physical changes in human beings is baloney, or at least unproven as yet. So, what does all this mean for us? Well, that's some of the basic questions that come up. And what occurred to me with my attention and attraction to the moon is that it's a handy little way to mark what's going on in your life or in my life. You don't need a cell phone. You don't need an internet connection. When we talk a lot about flow and cycling and releasing and setting intention in New Thought, and that all comes into play and has always come in. That's what's been established as what happens, how that correlates with the phases of the moon. So, especially in today's world when we can get sidetracked and distracted and focused on other things, it's a quick, simple little reminder of what's really important and where are we in all this and grounding ourselves. It's said that the sun sees your body and the moon sees your soul. So it's that way of getting a little deeper into what's really happening. So watching the moon is a way to connect with nature, and we can use it as a guide. And it's really starts with the cycle, really starts with the new moon. So the new moon is when you can't see the moon at all. Um, you can compare the whole cycle to the breath cycle. So think of it as the new moon is the breath or is the pause between breaths. So the new moon starts the cycle. Um, it lasts for just a couple of days. And it ends when you see that first little tiny sliver of a crescent in the sky. So that starts the cycle of the waxing moon or the moon as it grows. It starts the cycle. So, and then and again, the new moon is a pause between the breaths, but it's the time for growing. It's the time for setting intentions. It's time to figure out what is the truth of what it is that you want. So this is when, as we say in New Thought frequently, plant the seeds. What is it that I want in my life? And this is the time when we plant the seeds because now it's going to grow over the next couple of weeks. So over the time of that waxing crescent, which takes about a week or so, that is the guidance. That's the reminder to fan the flames of what you want, to really commit to what you want. When you plant the seeds, you can't just throw them in the ground and forget about them. You've got to, you're not going to dig them up, but you have to water them. You've got to tend to them. You've got to, it's time to really commit to their coming to fruition. Um, so you want to connect with those intentions and really feel the truth they will come into existence. Really feel they're growing. And it's that belief phase. It's the belief and that knowing that this is here now. This will be here. This is on its way. It is here now. The waxing crescent keeps growing for about, like I said, roughly 2 weeks, because every 2 weeks there's a new moon, and then 2 weeks later there's a full moon. Then we move into the full moon phase. And this is the other end of the lunar cycle. Think of it, if we want to link it to the breath cycle, it is the pause with the inhale. So after you inhale. So the pause between the breaths was the new moon. Take that breath in, you fill up during the waxing crescent, and then you have that pause at the full moon. And this is when we are told to bask in gratitude, count our blessings, think about the grace, and sit in that fullness of all of that. Just that pause. You're holding on, you've got all that breath inside, all that goodness. And then you release it. So the full moon really represents release, because over the next couple of weeks or next week or so, you're gonna it will release. So then we move into the waning crescent, which is letting go of what no longer serves us. Maybe it's pulling up the weeds. I don't know, because we don't usually use the weeds. But the waning crescent is releasing all that, letting go what no longer serves us, and create space for something new. So where are we in this cycle? Well, right now, we are coming up to the full moon. Tomorrow at 11:47 p.m., it reaches peak illumination. It is the October full moon. And interesting, all full moons are given a name. Different cultures have different names. They're kind of similar. It's really interesting. Some of them come from European culture, some of them come from Asian cultures. A lot of the names come from American, Indian, and other indigenous peoples' cultures. So this moon tomorrow is called the Hunter's Moon. And there's a little bit of a difference in the way the names are applied here, because most of the time it's always the same. However, the harvest moon is the moon that is closest to the autumnal equinox. That marks the end of the harvest period. So depending on when that autumnal equinox falls and when the full moon comes after it, that's always the harvest moon. And then the following one is the hunter's moon. So this year it comes in October. So it's also the first supermoon of the year. What does that mean? Well, NASA tells us, do we still have NASA? I can't remember. NASA tells us that the moon is 266,000 miles away, something like that. 266,000 miles away. But as it revolves around the Earth, there are periods when it's closer. So when the moon is closest to the Earth is when we have a supermoon, and it appears bigger and brighter in the sky. We're going to have 3 this year, and this is the first one. So the hunter's moon symbolizes abundance and preparation. It helps us to focus our energy for the dark half of the year. And it really marks that turning point between the harvest season and the winter. So spiritually, it symbolizes focus and strength and inner work. And this all comes from the fact that our ancient ancestors, there was no more food growing. They had to prepare for the winter. They did that by hunting, and they hunted by the full moonlight to track the game. And then they had to prepare what they hunted, to last over the winter. So it's all about getting ready for that. So, you could look at this as the full moon at this time represents gathering of inner strength and assess our needs for the months ahead. So we can look inward. We can see what is complete and what's no longer needed. Take decisive action on what we really need. So sometimes we're encouraged to think about the moon and even kind of journal on what is coming up for us at the time of the full moon. So we talked about focus and strength, preparation, clarity for the hunter's moon. But if you're interested in journaling, you're really going to focus on release and transformation. So think about, and this can help you to prepare for what intentions do I need to set when the full moon comes along? I mean, the new moon comes along. Think about what lessons or strengths have I gathered during the year, or even just the previous month? What fears and beliefs and patterns do I need to get rid of? What's been hidden? What have I hidden from myself and I'm now ready to see? And what do I want to honor and give thanks to before the winter? Again, the full moon is the time of release, and I'm I'm going to read a release spell, it's called, actually, or prayer, whatever you want to call it, for the full moon. And this would apply for whatever moon, does not necessarily the hunter's moon. Here we go. By the light of the moon so bright, I release what's heavy, blocking my sight. Old wounds, old fears, I now set free. With love and grace, I return to me. From shadow to light, I rise and reclaim. My spirit renewed, no longer the same. I trust the flow, I now release. With open heart, I welcome peace, and so it is. So I just want to say I used a couple of, I can get this, have this posted if you'd like it. Um, Helpful websites that I found to kind of get some of this information and learn more about this are Pagan Grimoire, Peculiar Brunette, and the Moon School are good sources if you want to follow this a little bit more. But I've always been interested in the earth-based religions. Always wanted to go back to what was there? What did people worship, or what was their spiritual connection before we had organized religions? And it's timeless. You know, we can still do that today. So happy full moon. Take a look. It's been really clear all week, and I've been able to watch the moon all week long and see it getting larger and larger. So I'm really looking forward to it. And it'll be full for a couple of days. I have a handy dandy moon calendar on my cell phone that I can pull up and say, okay, where are we? You know, how many days do we have till the full moon or the new moon, whatever. So it just kind of helps when you can't actually see it. Oh, whoever put that, thank you, Dean. I love that full moon that just came up. So thank you for your participation. Happy full moon.